After suspecting my husband's infidelity, I secretly investigated all the young girls in the company. He accused me of being unreasonable. After 10 years of marriage, don't you have any trust in me? We had a big fight and started a cold war. That is, until the doctor told me, your husband has cancer. It's best to intervene and treat it as soon as possible. I rushed home in a hurry, and the nanny opened the door wearing my pajamas. She said, I'm pregnant, and the child is your husband's. I suspected Ethan was having an affair because of a very minor incident. It was the day the company secured the bid. He said, why don't we order some afternoon tea to celebrate? I remember you have a membership card for that cake shop, right? Let's order the recently popular red velvet cake. I'll pay. Ethan never eats desserts or snacks, and whenever he sees me having some, he always scolds me. What's so nutritious about these? Lucy, just because our life is better now doesn't mean you should be wasteful. Wouldn't it be better to save the money and buy some vegetables? So when I heard him say that, I was stunned and my mind wandered for a moment. But I still took out my phone and ordered the afternoon tea he wanted, having the cake shop deliver it straight to the company. My colleagues were all delighted, talking animatedly in the break room. Thank you, boss, and thank you, boss's wife. I enthusiastically distributed the cake to everyone. When I reached the last piece, I realized there was one missing. It wasn't until the next day, when I went to Ethan's office to deliver a contract, that I saw the cake tray in his office trash can. My heart tightened, and countless thoughts flashed through my mind. Calmly, I took out a blood glucose meter to check his blood sugar. The reading on the blood glucose meter is normal. He wiped his finger with a tissue and frowned as he spoke to me. Lucy, my blood sugar has been stable for a long time. There's no need to be so cautious, I said coldly, sitting opposite him. Ethan, remember to wipe your mouth when you eat on the sly. At your age, don't make us all lose face. His face immediately changed. What are you talking about? What cheating? Lucy, can you stop acting like a resentful wife? I was instantly ignited by his words. I lifted the trash can and overturned it onto the table. The garbage and that plate smeared with cake cream were all spread out on his desk. Don't tell me you ate this cake? Ethan, leaving aside the fact that you don't like sweets. You hate people eating in your office the most, not even I'm allowed. So who is this person that you like so much? Ethan's face darkened, but he didn't say a word. His attitude made me think he was giving silent consent. So I pulled open the door to his office and walked into the conference room, notifying all the young, pretty girls in the company to come for a meeting. The meaning behind my words was so clear that it set the entire company abuzz with gossip. Ethan couldn't take it anymore and stormed into the conference room, where we had a huge argument. Lucy, why are you so suspicious? I ate that cake myself. I just didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry. His lie was too clumsy. I couldn't help but scoff. Are you even trying to come up with a better excuse anymore? He didn't speak, just stood at the door of the meeting room with his lips pressed tightly together. I was so angry that I grabbed my bag and left. After that day, we began a cold war. Until this morning. The family doctor notified me to go to the hospital to pick up the medical checkup report. Lucy, your body is perfectly healthy. It's just Ethan. He paused for a moment, looking at me with a somewhat tangled expression. My heart skipped a beat, and I anxiously asked him. What's wrong with my husband? He handed me another report from the table. Lung cancer, already in the late stages. I suggest intervening with treatment as soon as possible. Whatever he said next, I couldn't hear any of it. When I stepped out of the hospital, the sunlight made me dizzy for a moment. I instinctively drove home. On the way, I ran several red lights and nearly got into an accident. There was only one thought in my mind: hurry home and take Ethan to the hospital for treatment. As long as he can live, I would give up anything. As long as he tells me he didn't cheat, I'll believe him. Hurrying home in a rush. When entering the password for the villa's gate, I was unexpectedly unable to open it. Not yet understanding why the password had been changed. I instinctively stood at the door and called Ethan. Before the call connected, the door opened from inside. The nanny Fiona, wearing my pajamas, stood at the entrance and blocked me. "Lucy, why are you back?" I felt an immediate sense of uneasiness. It seemed to me that she had absolutely no sense of boundaries. How could she so casually wear my clothes? "Fiona, my husband and I kept you on as a nanny out of pity because we felt sorry for you. But you should at least follow some basic rules, right? If I catch you doing something like this again, you're done here. You'll have to leave." She looked up at me steadily, a strange smile curling at the corner of her lips. "I was just about to tell you, I'm done." As she spoke, her hand moved toward her lower abdomen. "I'm pregnant, and the baby is your husband's." At that moment, I even thought she was joking with me. Fiona had been our nanny for 3 years. 3 years ago, she was just a salesperson at Ethan's and my company. My husband owed a debt, and the creditor came to the company, forcing her to repay it. Since the impact was really bad, the company fired her. But we also considered that she had a child to take care of, which was truly difficult. She couldn't spend her days hiding and running around. So we let her come to our home to work as a nanny for Ethan and me. Ethan is 3 years older than me. Fiona is 5 years older than Ethan. She's almost 40 years old now. Not only has her figure gone, her complexion is dull too. She never dressed up on weekdays just so she could work well. I never believed that Ethan's affair would be with her. I was just about to speak when Ethan's voice came from the other end of the phone. "Lucy, what she said is true. Let's get a divorce." Sitting on the sofa in the living room, waiting for Ethan to return, Fiona, like a hostess, poured me a cup of tea. "Give it a try, someone just gave this to Ethan. Because I suffer from insomnia, I never drink tea." This is something Fiona is well aware of. There is a tea table in Ethan's study. Every time he brews tea and invites me to taste it with him, I outright refuse. He said, life loses half its joy without good tea. Once, Fiona approached him and mentioned that her family owned a tea plantation. They struck up a conversation, and over time, they got to talking. From then on, Ethan would pour her a cup whenever he brewed tea. Looking back now, I think Fiona might have already started developing inappropriate feelings from that moment on. Anger surging in my heart, I simply threw the cup of tea at Fiona. The tea wasn't even warm anymore. I understood she was hinting at how people change after one's influence fades. She didn't dodge. Gently wiping the tea off her clothes, she then put on a show of sitting down on the sofa. "Lucy, there's no need to get so worked up. You and Ethan haven't had a married life for 3 or 4 years now. Even though we live under the same roof, our relationship is like that of coworkers. What's the point of continuing a marriage like this? Ethan is already this age and still doesn't have any children. As a woman, that's on you. You should actually be thanking me. Aren't you fond of being a career woman? With Ethan staying with me, you'll have more time to focus on your work in the future." I trembled with rage, feeling as if all the blood in my body had frozen. How could someone have the audacity to be so shameless after becoming the other woman? "Fiona, being shameless isn't something you can take this far. Isn't it just Ethan's money that you're after? Do you really think that after I divorce him, you'll be able to enjoy life as his wife? That's utterly ridiculous." Fiona's expression was grave. She clenched her fist and was about to speak when Ethan hurried back. "Lucy, don't make things difficult for her. If you have something to say, talk to me." As soon as he said this, Fiona's expression shifted slightly. Immediately, she fell to her knees before me. Clutching at my legs, she burst into loud sobs. "Lucy, it doesn't matter how much you hit or scold me. But the child is innocent, he is Ethan's only bloodline. I beg you, just give the child a chance to live." I didn't react in time and was frightened. Instinctively, I tried to raise my leg to kick her. Ethan quickly rushed in front of me and pushed me hard. Although I fell onto the sofa, half of my arm hit the coffee table directly. The pain was so intense that I turned pale, unable to speak, and sweat beaded on my forehead. Lucy, I didn't realize you could be so vicious. I even felt a bit guilty toward you. Humph, it seems you got exactly what you deserved. His test results were still in my bag. Suppressing both the emotional and physical pain, I slowly turned my head to look at him. Ethan, are you really going to divorce me because of this woman? Absolutely. I let out a cold laugh and forced myself to sit up straight. I pointed at Fiona, who was being held in his arms. If you had found someone younger, prettier, I wouldn't be so shocked. You had to choose something like this. Ethan, are you deliberately trying to humiliate me? He straightened his clothes and helped Fiona sit down on the sofa. Then, he turned to look at me. Lucy, I love her. She's not as young as you, nor as capable and talented. But being with her makes me feel at home. From the moment you open your eyes until you fall asleep, it's always about work. You've never cared about what I want. But Fiona is different, she carefully plans my 3 daily meals for me. While ensuring nutritional balance, she allows me to eat what I want. But what about you? Every time we eat together, you always say this can't be eaten, that can't be eaten. I really feel that being with you is utterly boring. When he said these words, Fiona was sitting beside him, head bowed. There was a faint look of satisfaction in her eyes. I spoke calmly, Ethan, she also has a son. Ethan frowned and took her hand. I don't care. I'll treat her son as my own from now on. I couldn't help but start to sneer, laughing until tears were almost streaming down my face. Ethan, the priest asked us a question when we got married. Whether in sickness or in health, whether in wealth or in poverty, do you want to marry him? Now I want to ask Fiona the same question. Whether Ethan is healthy or sick, rich or poor, do you still want to be with him? Fiona probably thought I was talking about property division. She moved closer to Ethan, took his hand, and said, I'm not with Ethan because of his money. He's a good person and treats us well. Even if he leaves with nothing, I'm still willing to be with him. Those words moved Ethan deeply. But we both know. Even if we go to court, he won't be left with nothing. The cancer diagnosis notice in my bag, I don't plan to take it out again. Since he chose someone else, whether he lives or dies has nothing to do with me from now on. I look at Ethan coldly and distantly. Take your woman and get out of my house. I'll have the lawyer send you the divorce papers. He was somewhat unexpectedly taken aback. After rising slightly, he settled back into his seat. Lucy, can we discuss this? You can have the money, but leave the house for me. Fiona is pregnant now, and it's quite inconvenient to move around. How laughable, why should I be charitable? All the money between me and Ethan is circulating through the company's accounts. The only property we have is this current villa. I just can't stand to see you two living comfortably. What does her pregnancy have to do with me? All I know is that my name is on the property deed for this house. If you really don't want to move, I'll take a loudspeaker and shout outside his son's school. Ask his son if it's embarrassing to have a mother like this. Ethan, unable to withstand my pressure, had no choice but to give up and left with Fiona. After they left, the huge villa was left with only me inside. The surroundings were empty and frighteningly quiet. The fading sunset glow streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows onto the floor. Unable to control myself, I curled up on the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. I'd been with Ethan since I was 18. At that time I had just started college, and he was a junior preparing for his internship. Neither of our families was particularly well off. But the good thing was, we were aligned in our goals. We both planned to rely on our own efforts to earn big money in the future. Throughout our 4 years in college, he gave me half of his internship salary every month for my living expenses. He would get upset if I refused it. He said, I know there are many guys chasing after you. I don't want others to think, why did you find such a lousy boyfriend? My heart ached with sympathy and moved by his words. Yet, I never spent a single cent of the money he gave me. I saved all that money along with what I earned from my part-time jobs. After I graduated from university, He said he wanted to start an e-commerce business. So, I took out all the savings I had and gave them to him to use as startup capital. During those years when I was with him through his entrepreneurial journey, we endured immense hardship. We could only live in a damp and gloomy basement. Sometimes we didn't know where our next meal was coming from. When we were too hungry to bear it, we'd go to the supermarket and sample food from the tasting counters. Though life was tough back then, we were happy. Because we believed things would get better in the future. Ethan often told me, once things turn around for us, I'm going to make you the happiest person in the world. I must give you all the very best things. Indeed, hard work pays off. In the second year, our online shop began to see success. The business continued to grow, expanding from a small online shop to a cross-border trading company. At the age of 25, we held our wedding. He turned and watched as I walked towards him in my wedding dress. Crying like a child, he couldn't even straighten his back. He said, "I'm sorry for keeping you waiting so long. I finally get to marry you." At that moment, I felt I had married the right person. Even if I were to part ways with Ethan, I would never fall in love with anyone else for the rest of my life. What's more, I firmly believed we would never separate. After getting married, even though our living conditions improved. But due to work-related matters, we often erupted into arguments. People around me advised me countless times. A married couple shouldn't work at the same company, let alone run a business together. It won't last long. Otherwise, just stay at home and enjoy life as a wife. I knew Ethan felt the same way, he had hinted at it many times in his words. But I didn't agree. Even though I love him very much, I would not abandon myself because of love. That year, when I was 28, I went out in the rain to sign a foreign trade contract and ended up having a miscarriage. It was Ethan's and my first child. The incident has always been like a thorn in our hearts. Ever since then, he has never touched me again. Over these years, I've constantly tried to find opportunities to mend the relationship between us. But I never could have imagined that he would cheat, and with someone like her. His words to me echoed in my mind for a long time. "Lucy, I love her." What about me? I'm 32 this year, and we've been together for 14 years. Did the love suddenly just vanish? The sky gradually darkened. Night fell over me, and everything around turned pitch black. I dragged my weary body into the kitchen. Take a bottle of red wine from the wine cabinet. This bottle of wine has been treasured by Ethan and me for a long time, and we always said we'd open it when there was something big to celebrate. I suppose today counts as a day worth celebrating. Celebrate him getting what he wanted. Celebrate my escape from misery. I picked up the decanter and wine glasses and headed toward the bedroom. On the sofa in the bedroom, a set of clothes was neatly folded. They were Fiona's. I frowned and walked over to the bed. I noticed a few curly, long hairs on the pillow. They weren't mine. The emotions I had just suppressed came surging back, overwhelming me. Annoyed, I found a pair of scissors and shredded the bed sheets, pillowcases, and Fiona's entire set of clothes. But I still felt absolutely disgusted. I called a moving company to come that same night. Drinking wine, I directed them to pack all of Ethan's belongings and all of Fiona's belongings. I even packed the trash from the maid's room without discarding any of it. The boxes piled up until they filled an entire small truck. I called Ethan, "Where are you right now?" His voice sounded as if he had just woken up. "Lucy? What are you trying to pull this time?" I spoke calmly. "There's a business contract that urgently needs your signature." He hesitated for a moment, then gave me his current address, a school district department near Fiona's son's school. After hanging up, I immediately sent someone over with the car, leaving Ethan's number as the recipient's contact. I then asked my lawyer to help me look up the property information. Sure enough, the property owner was Ethan. He bought this property 2 years ago. It seems he was already involved with Fiona back then. The alcohol kicked in, and I was too drunk to keep my eyes open. Barefoot, I sat on the bay window, staring blankly outside. Around 2 a.m., Ethan called me, but I didn't answer. He angrily sent me a message. "Lucy, are you out of your mind? Bringing all this stuff over in the middle of the night, where on earth am I supposed to put it?" Where he puts it is none of my concern. As long as it's not in front of me, cluttering my sight, that's enough. Later, the moving company told me Ethan had paid to rent their truck, $1,000 a day. The lawyer worked quickly. The next afternoon, we were already sitting in the law office, signing the divorce papers. Ethan came alone, without Fiona. I sat across from him wearing sunglasses and pushed the divorce agreement toward him. "Sign it, let's end this sooner." He carefully flipped through the agreement, checking it word by word. When he reached the end, he slammed the table in anger. "Lucy, what do you mean by this? A 28 split of the property, with me getting 20% and you 80. And all expenses outside the family over the years have to be counted as my personal expenses, not as marital personal property? Have you gone completely insane over money?" I didn't take off my sunglasses, crossing my legs and leaning back in the chair. "Leaving you with 2 is my final bottom line. The company shares will still be split 50-50 as usual. But the money in the account needs to have my portion refunded. Ethan, you don't have to agree if you don't want to. Then we'll just go through the legal process. Anyway, I have plenty of time to slowly drag this out with you. I just don't know if the child in Fiona's belly can afford to wait." Ethan stood opposite me, looking down from above. He was so angry that the fist he clenched couldn't stop trembling. It took a long time. Holding his breath, he suddenly picked up the signing pen on the table and signed his name on the divorce agreement. "I already asked someone to inquire yesterday. Fiona has been asking about applying for a household registration recently. If she doesn't marry Ethan, her child won't be able to register for a household registration in City A. So Ethan is in more of a hurry than I am regarding the divorce." After leaving the law firm, we went directly to the Civil Affairs Bureau. The divorce procedures were quickly completed. The staff asked us to wait until the 30-day cooling-off period was over, then come back to pick up the divorce certificate. Before leaving, Ethan told me, "Don't even think about withdrawing the divorce. Lucy, I have no feelings for you anymore. Dragging this out will only hurt us both." I ignored him and drove back to the office on my own. As soon as I stepped through the company's door, he followed right after me. The world of adults can be so frustrating at times. Even though we had just gotten divorced, in a different context, we immediately had to focus on work. In this regard, Ethan and I had a perfect understanding. We didn't make our divorce public at the company. Even though we didn't bring it up ourselves, someone else just had to. Right before the end of the workday in the afternoon, Fiona brought her son to the office. He was about 12 or 13, just the age when kids are at their most energetic. I immediately headed straight into Ethan's office as soon as I entered the company. Loudly, I shouted, "Dad, I want to eat that cake again from last time." I understood instantly. The cake tray I had found in the trash can in his office last time was actually eaten by Fiona's son. No one can tell me it wasn't taught to him. His voice was so loud that everyone in the company could hear it. Immediately, people began to whisper softly, craning their necks to look at me. Ethan came out of the office looking pale as well. Some employees who were on good terms with me guessed what had happened. They immediately came to my side and stood up for me. "Boss's wife?" I glanced at Fiona dismissively. "She's your boss's wife now. Just call me Lucy from now on." After saying that, I picked up my bag and walked out of the company. While sitting in the car, I took out my phone and sent a cake shop voucher to each of those who had stood up for me earlier. After some thanked me, they quickly sent messages to ask, "Lucy, have you divorced? I'm a veteran employee of the company, having followed you and Ethan along this journey. We've seen how much you've contributed to the company. If you plan to leave, I'll definitely follow you." I comforted him and encouraged him to focus on his work, without saying much more. Ethan's condition is difficult to cure. Once he discovers he's sick, he will definitely find a way to rest and seek treatment. At that time, with him gone from the company, it will be just me calling the shots. Why should I leave the company now, handing it over to someone else? Not long after, Ethan arranged for Fiona to work in the company, giving her an administrative position. She swaggered into my office to bring me coffee. "Lucy, don't blame Ethan. He was just worried that I would be too bored staying at home alone, so he wanted me to keep him company at the office. Don't worry, we won't exploit any loopholes in the company's maternity leave policy for personal gain." I sneered disdainfully, knowing all too well that what she truly wanted wasn't just the few months' salary during maternity leave. Instead, she wanted to drive me out as quickly as possible, to make this company hers and Ethan's. But coming to me with her schemes was a mistake. I took a sip of coffee and immediately spat it out. "Is it this sweet? Didn't the admin staff inform you when you joined? I only drink black coffee, no sugar, no milk. You can't even handle such a small thing properly. I really don't know what use you are." After saying that, I slammed the coffee cup down in front of her. "What are you standing there for? Go pour another cup." Her face flushed red as she held back her anger and walked out with the coffee. When she came in again, she was holding a new cup of coffee. This time, her expression toward me wasn't as pleasant as before. After setting the coffee down, she was about to leave. I stopped her. "Wait a moment." In front of her, I took another sip of coffee and then spit it out. "How did you handle this? Why is this coffee lukewarm? Doesn't everyone in the administration office know I only drink iced coffee?" Furious, she clenched her fists, turned around, and walked up to me. "Lucy, are you intentionally messing with me?" I looked at her with amusement. "I didn't ask you to pour me coffee, you brought it in on your own. Since he's drawing a salary from the company and working here, he ought to act like it. Does that mean I'm not allowed to say a word if you're not doing your job properly?" She was left speechless by my response. She turned and walked out, then poured me another cup of coffee. This time, I didn't make things difficult for her over the coffee. It's just that after she left, I made a call to the administrative office. "What's going on with the staff you have? They dirted my desk and didn't even bother to clean it." In less than 10 minutes, Ethan stormed in. It wasn't hard to guess, Fiona must have run to him crying. "Lucy, if you have a problem, take it up with me. Harassing a pregnant woman, don't you feel guilty?" I couldn't help but let out a derisive laugh. I threw his own words back at him, "Making a pregnant woman work, don't you feel guilty?" I thought Ethan really cared about his wife and kids. He even made her work while she was heavily pregnant. His brow furrowed deeply. Without thinking, he retorted, "You can be a successful career woman, why can't she? I just wanted her to go out and find her own sense of worth, to gain some confidence. What's wrong with that?" His words made my heart ache. Back when I was at the company, he went to great lengths to persuade me to come home. Now he finally has a wife who can stay home and be a good wife to him, yet he wants to drag her out again. Men are truly strange, they want it both ways. I paid no more attention to Ethan and kept my head down, focusing on my own work. He stood in front of me for a long time. In the end, he took a few tissues, wiped my desk clean, then turned and walked out. Fiona stayed at the company and did not leave. Although he no longer caused trouble in front of me, we still couldn't avoid crossing paths. So on the day the cooling-off period for divorce ended, when Ethan and I went to get our divorce certificate, I called the family doctor and told him that Ethan and I were already divorced. Ethan's condition let him tell Ethan himself about it. I was sitting in the office, just about to take out the divorce certificate to take a photo and post it on social media. Ethan barged in, with Fiona trailing behind him. "Lucy, you knew about my illness all along, didn't you? No wonder you agreed to the divorce so readily. So you're trying to abandon me now that I'm sick? After all these years together, I really misjudged you." Ethan's anger seemed utterly ridiculous to me. After all, it was he who had brought up the idea of divorce. I sat quietly in my chair and looked up at him. Yes. I knew about your cancer all along. Taking care of a cancer patient is such a hassle. I don't want to spend the rest of my life tied down by this. That's exactly why I agreed to divorce. Ethan got the answer he wanted, but it didn't make him happy. We stood there, staring at each other, but he couldn't find the words to say. He seemed to be waiting for me to offer some kind of explanation. But now that the divorce papers are final, what is there left to explain? Fiona stood by his side, holding on to his arm. Ethan, don't be afraid, I will always be by your side. We will focus on treating your illness, you will definitely be okay. Hearing her say this, Ethan felt a little better inside. Yet he failed to notice the panic and evasion in Fiona's eyes as she hid behind him, her thoughts racing. Ethan took a long leave from work and rested at home. Fiona accompanied him to many major hospitals, seeking consultations from specialists. The results were the same as those I had previously inquired about with the doctor. Life could only be sustained by relying on medication. There was no way to completely eradicate the cancer cells. In other words, treatment was futile. During that time, Fiona's social media feed was filled daily with updates about her life with Ethan. Ever since Ethan found out he was ill, whether due to psychological stress or something else, he has aged and withered drastically, becoming nothing but skin and bones. Over half a month later, Fiona sent me a message. Ethan and I have decided to get married. The wedding is scheduled for a week from now. As a partner of the company, Lucy, it doesn't seem right if you don't come, does it? After thinking for a moment, I replied to her. Don't worry, I'll send you a big gift when the time comes. Ethan and Fiona's wedding was arranged in a hurry. When I arrived, Ethan's parents stood at the entrance with dark expressions, unwilling to go inside. What kind of daughter-in-law? Have you lost your mind from being sick? I don't know how you could possibly be interested in that kind of woman. Regardless, Lucy is the only daughter-in-law I will ever have. Ethan's suit hung loosely from his frame, and his complexion was dreadful. The awkwardness filled the air as people came and went. How many times do I have to tell you? Lucy and I are already divorced. She knew I was sick and wanted to divorce me. She showed no mercy at all, completely unlike Fiona. She took care of me from start to finish during my illness. She just wants to have a wedding now, get a marriage certificate, and secure a future for herself and the child. I have no reason to refuse her. Ethan's mother still refused to believe it. She brushed off Ethan's hand as he tried to support her. Impossible, Lucy isn't that kind of person. Have you forgotten when you had that hypertensive cerebral infarction a few years ago? You almost didn't make it. Lucy stayed by your side for days without eating. Even after you were out of danger, she never left your side. She took such good care of you that even the professional caregivers felt ashamed. Once you recovered, he memorized everything you could and couldn't eat. He kept a close eye on you, fearing you might get sick again. Have you completely forgotten all of this? Ethan pursed his lips and fell silent, his gaze drifting away. I took a step forward and walked toward the door. Greeted his mom and dad. Uncle and auntie, please come in and have a seat. After all, it's Ethan's big day, and he wouldn't want you to miss it. His parents finally agreed to go in and sit down, but they insisted I sit next to them. The people around exchanged glances, unsure of what to say. Fiona walked in wearing her wedding gown. For the sake of appearance, she had chosen one that wasn't very fitting. The fat on her shoulders and waist was all squeezed out. Her makeup was also slightly cakey. Under the harsh lighting of the banquet hall, she looked like a ghost. But she knew it was Ethan's parents who insisted I sit there, so there was nothing she could do. Ethan stood on stage, knelt on one knee before Fiona. The host began to liven up the atmosphere. Let's all shout together, marry him, marry him. Suddenly, the banquet hall door was forcefully pushed open. Fuck, Fiona, you're playing dirty with me. Didn't we agree that after tricking them out of the money, you'd bring our son back home with me? And now you're actually marrying this dead man. The person who stormed in and spoke was Fiona's ex-husband. After falling into debt and getting involved in trouble, I was locked up for 2 years. I had just been released half a year ago. I had seen them sneaking around near my home a few times before. But since they were a married couple after all, I didn't interfere. After divorcing Ethan by mutual agreement, I looked into their situation. I arranged for someone to invite her ex-husband out for a meal and a few drinks. Once the alcohol loosened his tongue, the whole story came pouring out. Fiona told him that being with Ethan was just to swindle money. Once the money was obtained, she would go back to her hometown with him to live a proper life. He even smugly believed that Ethan was an easy mark. Ethan managed to stand up with the help of the groomsmen. He certainly knew who the man in front of him was. Glaring fiercely at Fiona, "Is everything he said true?" Fiona's makeup was smeared from crying. Panicking, she quickly tried to explain to Ethan. "Honey, listen to me. He's lying to you, he just can't stand to see me doing well. Believe me, how could I possibly choose him over you?" When she said this, I mocked her in my mind. Ethan was the same, choosing her over me. But now, it doesn't matter anymore. It's me who doesn't want him now. The harm shouldn't extend to the elders. Supporting Ethan's parents, I turned to Ethan and said, "Clean up your own mess. The elderly can't take any more turmoil. I'll take your parents to rest first." Ethan nodded at me, then led people to surround Fiona's ex-husband. I didn't pay any attention to what happened afterward. Occasionally, I would hear gossip from colleagues in the company. Luckily, Ethan hadn't registered the marriage with Fiona first. Otherwise, it would be too late for regrets now. Fiona was dragged away by her ex-husband and taken back to her hometown, where she would likely face frequent beatings in the future. They say the child in her womb isn't even Ethan's, but belongs to her ex-husband. Ethan's parents didn't leave. They stayed by his side to take care of him. The wedding was ruined, and he and Fiona split up. But he didn't cancel his leave to return to work. He checked directly into the hospital. Colleagues went to visit him and came back to tell me. Actually, Ethan doesn't have any physical issues. She gave me a thoughtful look before lowering her head and saying, "It's just a matter of the heart." I pretended not to understand. Maintaining my usual demeanor as a career-driven, capable woman, I energetically organized my work. After being away on a business trip for a month, Ethan's mother suddenly reached out to me upon my return. "Lucy, come see him," she said. "Ethan doesn't have much time left. He wants to see you one last time before he goes." Although my marital relationship with Ethan has come to an end, I used to hate him for why he treated me this way. But I have long let go and found peace. He was not good enough, not me. There is no reason for me to torture myself with his mistakes. So faced with such a request from the elderly, I couldn't refuse. I took some fruit and went to the hospital to see him. What does it feel like to face the end for the first time? Ethan lay in bed, his cheeks sunken. Even his eyes seemed somewhat clouded. He only moved them when he saw me arrive. His eye sockets were red and slightly moist. Ethan's mother left the two of us alone and went out. He looked at me remorsefully and said, "I'm sorry, Lucy. My family doctor told me you said to him back then, as long as I can stay alive, you're willing to pay any price. It's all my fault for being blind. I'm sorry for everything. If it weren't for you reaching out to Fiona's ex-husband, I'd still be kept in the dark." My face remained calm, without a single ripple stirring in my heart. "Ethan, don't misunderstand me. I went to find Fiona's ex-husband not because I care about you, but because I'm afraid that one day when you die, the company will fall into her hands. After all, this is the result of over a decade of my hard work, and I don't want others to reap the rewards." Ethan opened his mouth but couldn't say anything for a long time. After a while, I started to feel a bit restless. Taking the initiative to speak up, "If there's nothing else, I'll be on my way." I stood up, ready to leave. He suddenly called out to me, "The company. I'll leave a will. After I'm gone, I'll transfer all the company shares to you. Lucy, I have only one request. Can we remarry? I don't want to leave any regrets before I die. I looked him straight in the eye and said seriously, no. Ethan, I don't love you anymore. He opened his mouth, but no words came out for a long time. The regret and unwillingness in his eyes were almost overflowing. I stood up and looked down at him from above. You don't need to worry about the company shares. The lawyer has already informed me that the will you secretly altered last time is invalid, because your mental state is unstable. The doctor has issued a certificate. As for the portion you wanted to leave to your parents, I will directly allocate a pension fund from my name to them, 10 times more than your shares, enough for them to live comfortably and travel the world for the rest of their lives. Ethan's face instantly turned ashen, his fingers gripping the bedsheet so tightly that his knuckles turned white. I continued coolly, adding salt to the wound. Oh, right, Fiona's ex-husband contacted me again last week and voluntarily recorded everything about the story she made up with you back then, also signing a written statement. I've already had my lawyer submit this evidence to the police along with recordings of her faking pregnancy and wedding fraud. The amount involved in the fraud is enough to put her behind bars for a few years. Her son will be temporarily placed under the care of welfare services until she gets out. As for the school district department you bought, you used company funds to pay the down payment 2 years ago. I have already initiated legal proceedings to freeze and recover it. I paused, a mocking smile curling at the corner of my lips. Ethan, didn't you say it was boring being with me? Now you've gotten what you wanted, you found someone who gives you that home feeling. And what happened? You've lost your home, your money, your health, and even your dignity. He coughed violently, tears mingling with sweat as they streamed down, his voice so hoarse it was almost inaudible. Lucy. I beg you, don't be so heartless. I leaned close to him, speaking softly yet clearly. Heartless? No, this is called fairness. When you betrayed me, did you ever consider showing me mercy? With that, I straightened up and left the ward without looking back. In the hallway, Ethan's mother, her eyes red, rushed up to me, grabbed my hand, and thanked me over and over. Lucy, thank you for still being willing to come see him, and thank you for helping us recover that money. That boy must be blind, we will always consider you the only daughter-in-law we'll ever have. I patted her hand and said, Auntie, from now on, you two can just relax and enjoy your retirement. If anything comes up, feel free to reach out to me anytime. A month later, Ethan passed away. On the day of the funeral, I attended wearing a well-tailored black suit, commanding the room with an undeniable presence. The photo used for his memorial was the same one from our marriage certificate. I had my lawyer inform the funeral home in advance not to change it. Let him take this photo with him, as a reminder. What he destroyed with his own hands was the woman in this world who loved him most and was most deserving of him. As the flowers were placed before the grave, I glanced down at the portrait and spoke quietly. Ethan, once something is lost, it can never be retrieved. Love is, life is, and so are you. With that, I turned and left, my high heels clicking crisply on the ground. The sun was shining just right, and the breeze was gentle as I drove back to the company. The company had been officially renamed Lou Group, with 100% of the shares belonging to me. A few newly signed major projects had just been launched, and the market value had quadrupled compared to its peak. When the employees saw me, they called out, "Hello, Lucy," with genuine sincerity. Just a few days ago, a headhunter offered me the position of CEO for the Asia region of a Fortune 500 company, and I haven't decided yet whether to accept it. Outside the car window, the city sped away in the rearview. I suddenly laughed. The best decision I ever made in this life was not wasting the rest of it on someone who wasn't worth it. All that is past is prologue. And my new chapter is just beginning, on a roll, unstoppable.